Hello, everybody, and welcome to Episode 5 of the Battle of the Rappahannock custom multiplayer game. In Part 4, we reviewed the turns between 10 a.m. and 11:40 a.m. We saw the Iron Brigade get captured in the southern part of the map. We saw some fighting between Farnsworth's cavalrymen and Jones's cavalrymen at Beverly Ford. And in the north, the Hazel River line was reached by the Federals of Sickles' Grand Division, and they are now pushing to cross that river. That brings us to the noontime staff meetings. This is the first open discussion the two sides have had since 10 a.m., and this is going to be the last until 2 p.m. Let's start with the rebel discussion. The turn began with the routing of the only Confederate units at Burnt Bridge Ford on Anderson's extreme left flank. And let's just pull up this map here so you can get a look at it. I'm going to put all the labels on the map for you, and you can see the Burnt Bridge is right over there on the left-hand side along the Hazel River. Adding the Confederate labels to the map, you can see that McLaws has 4 infantry brigades in the south. They are trying to move up to cover these fords. The 11th Virginia Cavalry has been routed along the Burnt Bridge Ford Road and are now going back towards Rixieville. It's pretty obvious, just looking at this map, that Sims and Barksdale's brigade will not be able to reach the Burnt Bridge Ford before the arrival of the Federal infantry from Ward's division of the 3rd Corps. You can also see that the other 2 divisions from 3rd Corps are quickly moving towards Old Ford, where skirmishing between Devon and Martin's brigade has already commenced. The turn began not only with the routing of the Confederate cavalry along the Hazel River line, but also with nearly all the defenders at Wheatley's Ford on Anderson's other flank, the extreme right. And zooming in on that map real quick, you can see that the Federals of Burbank's brigade have pushed against Wheatley's Ford and have routed some cavalrymen, leaving just the 14th Alabama and a small cavalry unit left at Wheatley's Ford. With the setbacks on either extreme flank of Anderson's line, Lee reiterated the importance of coming to support Anderson's right flank to AP Hill. Rodes must hurry to reach that position. Anderson also expressed his view that the sustained artillery duel at Tin Pot Ford was not sustainable for much longer. The losses were mounting, and the artillery could not hold out much longer. If forced to retreat, Anderson would fall back on Brandy Station. The discussion then turned to the growing crisis on Anderson's other flank. There was simply not enough men to stop any determined Federal advance along the Hazel River. McLaws would fall back to Brandy Station if pressed and attempt to regroup there with Wilcox if possible. Switching over now to the noontime Union discussion, Hooker met with his generals and asked them for their views about the current situation. Reynolds flatly stated that my wing cannot defend against 2 Confederate corps without significant assistance. The Federals had now identified both the Confederate 2nd and 3rd Corps in the south, with the Confederate 1st Corps acting opposite Sickles' Grand Division and Meade's position. Reynolds now proposed something unexpected to Hooker. A radical idea would be to shift the entire army west of the Rappahannock, crush the rebels on that side, and use the river to protect an advance to the south. If we intend to defend the towns east of the river, then we need to match the Rebs in numbers and can't allow them to drive a wedge between our forces. Hooker was not convinced, though, and instead ordered Reynolds to defend at Morrisville, while Sykes held the river line and Sickles attacked across the Hazel River. So once more, it's time for my unasked for 2 cents. Pulling up the overhead map here, I feel like the Confederates are just bluffing with Anderson's corps on the left flank. They don't have enough strength to really cover all of these lines just on the Hazel River alone. And is it dangerous or is it genius? I mean, so far they've been successful in holding their lines on that side of the river, but you have to wonder how much they can continue to hold. If Wilcox's division is forced back to Brandy Station, and the Federals are able to cross at Tin Pot Ford, they will be in behind McLaws's division and cut off his direct line of retreat, which would then force McLaws to fall back along a very circuitous circuit back towards Stevensburg through Culpeper. And with all the Federals streaming across the Hazel River, it's going to be very complicated just to try to save whatever's left of Anderson's corps. Keeping the Federals demoralized, I believe, is what the Confederates are looking to do. They want to continue to put the pressure on Reynolds and just keep demoralizing them by inflicting a few hundred casualties here and there, and it becomes death by 1,000 cuts as the Union Army gets gobbled up. Lastly, Pender needs to rejoin Rhodes. The other division of Hill's Corps is already moving against the Wheatley Ford area, and Ewell's entire corps is pushing against Reynolds. Pender's division just sort of seems to be in the way and not really accomplishing much. They just need to rejoin Rhodes and drive up against Meade's left flank, but that's just my opinion. For the Federals, you know what? Reynolds is right. Reynolds does need to get back with the other two Union forces, and they all need to move to the west side of the river. Trying to defend their objectives right now, they just don't matter. The Union objectives are well behind their known lines. They're isolated from the action going on the western side of the map, and they can easily just take the Confederate objectives if that's what they're worried about. Trying to defend their own while also attacking is going to weaken their armies substantially. They need to concentrate against the Confederates and defeat them at one point on the map. And they can do that if they crush Anderson. And the best way to do that, like I said, concentrate and attack, throw everything they have against one isolated Confederate wing, and let the other two Confederate corps run off to the north and capture a few objectives. All right, moving forward to the end of turn number 26 at 12 p.m. The Confederates are moving for Rixeyville. McLaws is going to send 2 of his brigades to try to block the turnpike heading south past the Hazel River. In the center, the artillery duel just continues and continues. Both sides have now lost about 16 guns in the center, and both are bringing up more. It shows no signs of ending. 3 of Rose's brigades are nearing Wheatley's Ford, and the other 2 are a few hours behind them. Attacking Reynolds, the Confederates continue to put pressure against Reynolds' rear guard and drive to the north. And the 2nd Delaware was finally overran. If you remember my commentary from episode 4, the 2nd Delaware was able to block and then delay Pender for a full hour as they advanced against Reynolds' rear. I could get into a long commentary again about the necessity of just simply meleeing isolated units, but I think I've already covered that. In the South, Brigadier General William Extra Billy Smith was killed in action, leading a charge against Reynolds' rear guard. The 12:20 p.m. turn now. Devon maybe crosses into a trap. As you can see here, Devon's cavalry brigade has crossed at Old Ford and been counterattacked by Martin's brigade of Confederate infantry from McLaws's division. But Martin's brigade has nothing but E-rated infantry with them, and it's going to be difficult for them to really get any sustained success against Devon. And not only that, but 2 divisions of the 3rd Corps are coming, and they are coming quickly. So anything that Martin wants to do needs to be accomplished very fast. During the counterattack by the Confederates, Brigadier General James G. Martin was wounded in action. This is going to hurt Martin's brigade even more, as they are now going to be led by the dreaded Colonel Anonymous. Back to the overhead map now, you can see that Ward has crossed the river unopposed along the Burnt Bridge Ford area. And in the south, Imboden's brigade has returned to help defend Wheatley's Ford after the Confederate infantry there were routed last turn. And we actually have reached a scenario milestone, which we need to stop and recognize for a moment. The Federals have just reached the 25% mark for victory points lost. As a reminder, they can lose 11,500 points before being forced to concede the game. They are now at 3,228 points lost, and this accounts for 28% of their allowed amount. The Confederates are currently at 19.6% of their allowed losses. Looking at the Confederate losses here as we take a brief timeout, feel free to hit the pause button if you want to check this out. But of special note, really, is just the largest number of casualties are from Stuart's division. On the Federal side, once again, feel free to hit pause if you would like to check this out. You can see up at the top left that the Federals have lost just about 5,800 men, and 1,850 of those are strictly from the Iron Brigade, which really hurt them in the beginning. But over on the right-hand side, you will see that Sickles' Grand Division has lost 0 men. So they are 100% fresh, and they're just now getting into the battle. On to the 1240 turn now. Martin's Brigade, as I thought, were forced to fall back. They had suffered a few routs, and they could not stop the Federals from crossing there. Barksdale and Sims have reached Rixieville. They're hoping to block the advance of Ward's division. And in the center, the artillery duel continues. More guns have been brought up by both sides, and they continue to knock each other off at a prodigious rate. 1 p.m. now, Ward is moving for Rixieville. He doesn't know quite yet that he's going to be blocked by the Confederate infantry, but he's hoping he's got enough strength to blow past them. In the center, Humphrey's division has crossed Old Ford, and they are now pushing against Martin's brigade, which is being forced back. On the right-hand side of the battlefield there, you can see that Hampton has concentrated his division and is moving along the easternmost road up towards Elkton. On to the 1:20 p.m. turn now, and Hampton continues to move on up to the east side. And really, there's not much to stop him currently, with the exception of a few regiments from Fisher's brigade. In the west, Martin is continually being pushed now by the Federal infantry, which are streaming over the river in greater and greater numbers. In the center, Rhodes is pushing back against Sykes' division some. He's not too aggressive right now, but he's getting more aggressive. But I feel like the Federals are still confident enough to hold the position that they've gained at Wheatley's Ford. Back to the Rixieville area, Ward has moved his Federal infantrymen into line and preparing to engage the Confederates that are blocking the turnpike. In the west, weird development, the Federals had a chance to get away with 6 of their artillery pieces. Instead, they opted to spike them. While in this particular instance, it probably wasn't the best move, for future reference, when you do spike guns, you prevent the enemy from gaining the full number of victory points that they otherwise would. So in this instance, instead of the Confederates gaining 30 points per gun when they are captured, they'll gain 15 points per gun. And in a game like this, where points are really at a premium, it's not necessarily a bad idea if you can't get away with your guns just to go ahead and spike them. 1:40 p.m. now, and in the center, Tin Pot Ford has changed hands. Here you can see the scattered units of Wilcox's division. He has roughly 3 brigades here, the other 2 being dispatched elsewhere. And on the other side of the river, you'll see Crawford's division, Barnes's division, and over 70 artillery pieces now aligned against Tin Pot Ford. The Federals attacked frontally against that area, captured a number of Confederate artillery pieces, and drove back the defenders of Tin Pot Ford. During this fighting in the center, Colonel Anonymous, one of many, was wounded in action, as was Brigadier General William Mahone, leading a brigade of Virginians. The 3rd Corps has mostly advanced across Old Ford now, and they are putting an extreme amount of pressure on Martin's brigade and the Confederates in that area. And Ward is also advancing now along the turnpike and putting, like I said, more pressure on McLaws's already stretched out forces. In the east, Hampton has continued his ride north. He doesn't know it yet, as the Federals are all in the wooded areas, but his line of advance is now blocked. So, my unasked for 2 cents about the last few hours of gameplay. And let's begin with the Confederates. First off, Anderson is in some real trouble here. The Federals are coming at him from multiple directions and with far superior numbers. And if they're able to get past his forces, they're going to be in the open fields and able to move right for Culpeper and Brandy Station. So what options are available for Anderson at this point? And I think you have to retreat to Stevensburg. I know the Confederates are saying Brandy Station, but if you go there, I don't see how it's going to help you, because they're still going to be able to get to Culpeper. And if they get there, they're going to be able to sweep around to Stevensburg, and then they're on all sides of you. And that could lead to a disaster. You could also get some help from A.P. Hill's corps. A.P. Hill could send part of Rhodes or maybe Pender over to the left flank and reinforce Anderson. Or perhaps you just merge Hill with the Confederates already in the east. Instead of trying to fall back to Brandy Station or Stevensburg, why not take the opportunity while it's still available and move to Wheatley's Ford and join Rhodes's division there? For the Confederates, the fun part of this battle is unfortunately over. They dominated for the first few hours of gameplay, but the Federals have been able to steady themselves and regain their composure. Not only that, but the Confederates have just crossed the 25% line with their allotted losses available for this game. For the Federals now, my opinion is that Reynolds needs to stay mobile. He gave Hooker some good advice when he said that they didn't need to worry about the objectives and they needed to merge their army in order to drive against Anderson. Unfortunately, that advice was not taken, but Reynolds does need to stay mobile. If he gets pinned down in one area with that many Confederates coming after him, it could end in a disaster. And the Federals need to worry about Lee and not the objectives. Trying to defend Elkton or Bealeton or Warrenton, it's the same mistake that the Confederates are making with Culpeper, Brandy Station, and Stevensburg. I don't believe this battle will be decided by who owns the objectives. I believe it's going to be decided by which army can militarily defeat the other army. For the Federals, they need to concentrate their army west of the Rappahannock. And I think this is important. If they can concentrate their army, they'll be able to do great damage to Anderson's corps and also capture the Confederate objectives at the same time. This might force the Confederates into making an offensive attack back over the Rappahannock River to try to regain their objectives or to regain lost points. And for the Federals, your time has come. The morning was really rough for them, but now with Sickles getting into it and Meade having more success at Tin Pot Ford, things are about to change here for the two sides. So what am I looking forward to in the next part? Well, Sickles going wild. He should be able to get past the Hazel River line, and once he's in those open fields, it's going to be a lot more fun for the Federals. And the Army of Northern Virginia's decisions. What are they going to do? Is Anderson going to continue to defend as much land as he can? Will they try to merge him somewhere else? What are they going to do? And the same goes for Reynolds. What will the Federals do with Reynolds? Both sides are dealing with the same problem of having one of their flanks being completely overwhelmed by enemy numbers. And I think this battle is going to come down to which will make the better decisions with that flank. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, give it a like on here and be sure to catch the next one.